Hi, my name's Dan Hadaway, and this is CyberViews. Today, I have returning a colleague who was there when we, witnessed the VISO concept be born. A lot of smaller banks, a lot of credit unions, even small businesses that are not regulated are in a situation where they can't afford to staff a full-time information security professional. And that's where my friend Jason Mikolanis comes in, because his company, Virtual Innovation, pioneered the outsourced information security management field. I mean, they were doing VISO services before people even knew that you could do VISO services. And so, Jason, since you were here earlier, I worry our audience didn't see the original podcast about the dawn of the VISO concept. Today, we want to talk about what VISOs are like today. But can you just bring everybody up to speed and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Dan. My name is Jason Mikolanis. I work for Virtual Innovations, an IT and information security consulting firm in Northwest Indiana. I am the VP of Security Services and head up the information security side of the business. We and I do a lot of work in the financial sector. And as you mentioned, a large portion of our business, my business, is helping banks in the virtual world, helping with the information security programs, doing everything there in a part-time basis to better support their institutions.
Well, and just to clarify, I mean, when we say virtual information security officer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're remote. Like the pandemic gave us a whole new meaning of the word virtual, but you go on site, you actually act in the capacity as an ISO, or at least consult with whoever's been designated their information security officer. Am I right about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the one reason I don't like that term is it puts constraints on it. So you think VISO, or virtual information security officer, now I'm plugged into everything. So in some institutions, we do that. In other institutions, I almost look at it as an a la carte type thing. Some groups are very strong, but somebody that did their business continuity plan or vendor management may have left the organization, so they need help with one side. I have a very large bank that I work with that they have their own ISO who's starting, well, he's probably been doing it for about 5 years now, but kind of mentoring them and helping them out. We'll talk every couple of weeks and things come up, or he'll be in an audit and call me up and say, "Hey, Jason, what's going on with this?" So it's not just, yes, I'm this, C-level type person who's in charge and barking orders to do all this stuff. We also, support them and help mentor groups that that are capable of doing things on their own as well.
Well, in our first episode, we talked a lot about the dawn of the concept and how, it occurred to you that, wow, you're at a talk and wow, I'm actually doing this. I guess I'm a ISO. But back then you started with small banks and now you're working across many verticals. Am I right about that? Or are you just completely in the banking field, or are you starting to work with organizations that are not just community-based banks?
Yeah, we at Virtual Innovation, we do a lot of IT work for different verticals. We do stuff in the dental orthodontic side. We have some engineering firms, a lot of different other, insurance, stuff like that. For the VISO, I will do parts in there. Yeah, and they're not so heavily regulated where they're required to have this quote title, but all of them do need help in different areas there with looking at vendors with.
Maybe you don't actually get the designation. You're the person that, ultimately goes to jail if there's any fraud committed from an information security perspective, right? But you're still consulting with whoever might have that designation. Am I getting that right? Or
yeah, absolutely.
So that seems to me like that would be kind of like a very interesting ramp up because, it's not like you can take the same set of expectations from, so I guess what I'm thinking is, how do you ensure that the virtual information security officer services you provide are tailored to the to the unique requirements of the businesses that you work with?
Well, as we talked about in the last one as well, too, that it is somewhat a la carte, and there are, size and complexity plays into it. So depending if it's a small real estate or lawyers, we make sure that what's the risk, and I know you preach this. I've been to so many of your talks. It's all about the risk assessment, right? Where can they get hit? What's their likelihood? And being able to customize that based off of that is the fundamental for all of this. So we may not do something to the level that the banks or the healthcare industry, because of their regulations, require them to do, but there's some basic principles off of that. All the guidelines for HIPAA and the CAT, which is cybersecurity assessment tool in the financial world, GLBA, all that's built off of NIST and ISO guidelines anyway. So you can't go wrong when you stick to industry best practices.
Got it. And so, one of the things I was kind of interested in, especially after our last, episode, was, from a risk management perspective, there's first of all, there's the risks that you're trying to help your clients manage. Vendor management risk, access management, incident response, business continuity, all the stuff we kind of went over in the last episode. But then there's also the risk to you. We talked about, that if you read the regulations the way I read them, the person who's designated as an information security officer could end up with liability, arising, personal liability arising out of any kind of issues that, that arise in a normal breach, as an example. And so that has to be compounded if you're offering virtual information security officers. I mean, what kind of risks do you face as a VISO, beyond the normal errors and omissions type risks? Are there any legal concerns and such that, would you be liable if there was a breach?
Well, if there's negligence on our part, then I believe so, yes. I think if I'm saying I'm doing something that I'm not, or I'm falsifying information, there's absolutely legal risk. The legal side, I leave to people above my pay grade. I help, in those discussions. But the way we structure this is, if with the regulators can't necessarily come after me because I'm not part of the bank. I'm a vendor for the bank. So the banks are responsible for having somebody as their ISO. So what I am is, I like to think of as the tutor or the, assistant that makes that ISO to be at the level they need to be at. So somebody, that's the only way this works, is I will not come into an engagement and say, I'm the virtual ISO and nobody on the bank has any skin in the game, because there's nothing, it's not worth it for me. There's too much risk there. So somebody has to have skin in the game internally, and I make them look good, hopefully.
I like that. I feel like if they don't have skin in the game, it would be a nightmare trying to get them to, because there's still a heavy lift. It's not like you're going to do everything. Take vendor management. You can help review the information that comes back, but it doesn't make sense to pay you to call all their vendors to have them send the information. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. Some of the testing, I can't come in and do a wire transfer. We need somebody internally to run with that stuff. We have, there's your service with the SEAM and the reports that you get every day. It's not feasible for us to look at those on a daily basis. Somebody internally has to be looking at changes. Now, 99.5% of the time, there's no major changes. When there is, that's when we get involved and take a look.
Yes. Excellent. Well, I also feel like if we're talking about the risk of the relationship, I think is what we're talking about now. You know what I mean? In other words, it's kind of interesting. There's meta risk that comes with the VISO relationship. But I have to say, and we didn't talk about this in our first episode, but one of the drivers that once I realized what you were doing and what other companies were doing for this, I started realizing that having a VISO substantially lessens the segregation risk that most small businesses face, because they're lucky if they can afford a full-time IT person. If they have a full-time IT person, that person is definitely going to handle a lot of the security management process. Well, what's nice about having a virtual information security officer, am I right, is that there's a third party that's watching over what they're doing, which helps with the segregation risk. That the whole notion that the person who can change the network shouldn't be the same person who's watching the network. Am I right?
Who's watching the watcher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If you have the keys to the kingdom and you're also auditing that, you come from the accounting world, that's just bad business practice, right? Hey, I'm sending out wires and I'm also auditing where that money's going, right? That's just a recipe for disaster. But no, we obviously trust people. These institutions hire good people, but it does add that extra layer of complexity to have somebody non-technical try to audit that and look at that. If you give somebody all these configurations for Active Directory or their core or all these other different systems and say, we need you to audit this, what are they saying? Well, tell me what I need to look at. So somebody else may be doing it, but they could manipulate the data so that it looks clean to them, obviously. So if I'm somebody that doesn't have network access, I could go in there and I could pull reports and I could get information and say, give me this raw data, and I could do those. And that's absolutely a staple of the review process and separation of duties that we provide.
And just so you know, what I like to stress is that what's really kind of interesting is the whole notion of segregation of duties. What a lot of our clients don't realize is that protects the IT person. You know, if they're and given that 70% of breaches are internal, if there's an internal breach where, you know, a lot of damage is caused to where forensics people are crawling around, you definitely want the IT person to be able to point and say, hey, this guy was watching everything that happened and he or she is not me. And so I really like to, I'm glad that we, didn't miss the segregation benefits of the virtual information concept. But now I'm going to get a little bit more awkward with you, because in our last, ask questions that might be a little more, difficult to answer, or at least my next question, Jason, I'm queuing it up for you. Get nervous. Not as kittens. But, in our last episode, I didn't even have to ask you to share some success stories, because it just kind of came out of describing how you stood up the VISO business at Virtual Innovation. The bank that you rescued for me, the clients you had that would always call you back right before the examination. You had to do a whole year's worth of work in 3 weeks and that sort of thing. But what I'd like to know, if you'd be willing to share, is maybe a couple of the challenges that, is there any kind of interesting challenges that arise out of the relationship that's established when a organization takes on a virtual information security officer?
That's a very interesting one. I think for me, I don't know if it's going to be an obvious answer, but it's trust. I don't want this to sound like a commercial for Virtual Innovation, but we don't do business like everybody else. We don't do the managed service provider model. We build by hour, so it's time and material. So we get paid for the work we do. And if you don't like the work, or you feel it doesn't add value to your business, we won't charge you for it. So a lot of people will look at that as, okay, they're waiting for the catch. And they're always waiting for that other shoe to fall, like, oh, that sounds great. Okay, but where are they going to get you? It's developing that relationship, getting to know us, how we work. and see that, we actually truly care. We're not just trying to get a customer to book business. We don't have quotas to say that, oh, I have to do this. I have to do this. Yes, we have to do work to keep the lights on. But at the end of the day, we're doing this. Our mission statement is to serve our customers by helping their systems be more secure, available, and recoverable. So, it's again, I take pride in that model where it's not, we have a bunch of interns and other people, and if that's other people's business model, I don't knock it. It's just how we've done things, and that's the reason why I've stayed here for so long, is because of that type of relationships. And it's just, you feel good going to bed every night knowing that you help people and you're doing stuff that makes a difference. So, there's always those challenges where you come in and say, hey, we have to have this done in 2 weeks, or you need help internally to pull all this stuff because you're walking into a bank. I could probably draw 75% of a program up because I know how a bank works. I know how this is what they do, but without knowing the vendors, without knowing the intricacies, it's very high end and it looks boilerplate for the most part. So, some folks are just, I'm too busy, I can't get you this. So I have a number of stories like that. But for me, it's when they finally understand that relationship and start trusting me and knowing that when I'm saying to do this stuff, it's not because I want, when we talk to them about putting you on there, it's not because we're trying to sell goods and services. It's truly because what this vendor adds to your institution is immeasurable. So that once we establish that, and have to thank you for that, because that helps back us. Because when we bring in folks like you guys make us look like rock stars.
Well, and then thank you for that compliment, and that's definitely our intention, right? Very similar to you, we've learned that our role is really to help our clients sleep at night, but then also make them look good. And by the way, I can definitely attest to the fact that you do that, and we bring you into our clients for that very reason as well. But I'm still gonna, especially since our partnerships out there, and I want to kind of drill down further. So the first thing, the trusting, I think that's very important. I bet you that is a challenge that you overcome every time you engage with a new bank, that it's going to take a while for you to earn their trust. I can see it as a good challenge. And then what you were talking about before, to me, it's the hardest part of being an information security officer, just from, watching our clients, is herding the cats that we call management towards what needs to happen. It's definitely a team approach towards safety, right? I mean, that's the thing about technology is, their first 5 words of the information security manual used to be, they updated, but it used to be technology permeates the organization, which I always say first 5 words, it's 4 words. But the point being is that because of that, security is definitely a team approach. And all those moving parts, coordinating them, getting them to work together, that's kind of a standard. That's the type of, challenge that every ISO, faces. The trust is a challenge that every ISO faces. But let me ask you this. This is what I always wondered if you would be, faced with as a virtual ISO, is because we run into in our little company, especially now that I'm handing the company leadership over to the next generation, where more than I would like, the left hand is not in touch with what the right, and things happen so quick now, that seems like that would be exacerbated in a VISO engagement. How have you run into the challenge of, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing type, challenges, and how have you overcome them?
Absolutely. I was trying to think of a way to tie in something you just said, and I think that fits to this as well. One of the things you talk about in speeches is culture, right? Having that security culture. And hiring a VISO doesn't make a security culture. It makes a security person. So again, some part of the challenge there is getting all of those folks involved to have their eyes and ears open for what needs to be escalated, right? And that's part of our challenge here as we start to expand, is how we could use technology to do that. Working with providers like yourself who watch our systems and send us alerts and phone calls. That's huge. If something bad is happening, getting a call from somebody letting stuff know there, training the folks internally to say if something bad's happening, to do that, and just having processes in place where we don't go a long period of time without looking at stuff. We're always trying to stay in touch with people and, hey, is anything going on? In our tech steering meetings, we have all these different meeting points to talk about, are there security incidents? Are there network changes? Are these things? That's the biggest thing for me, is they go in and they change a whole bunch of systems and not tell you.
Yeah.
So that's selfishly why in our monthly tech steering meetings, I want to know what's changed. So do I have to adjust our program or ask any additional questions?
Well, and I mean, one of the things that I've heard auditors say about you guys is you have a really good change management system in place. And I feel like change management is where most problems are born, if you ask me. And so it's a very critical process to focus on anyway. And by the way, a couple of our interviews on CyberViews have been about change management. But I bet it's even more critical, even more necessary when you have that virtual relationship. So,
absolutely. One thing to add to that is part of the virtual services we developed it came from that. So many, many moons ago, we would, you're billing customers for doing this work, and you're going in and you're cleaning up their antivirus, their patches, their backups and stuff like that. I developed a reporting process every month that went to the board or to senior management as kind of like, hey, this is what we're doing. Hey, there's this big bill going out to virtual innovation every month. What are they actually, as our previous company, I started doing this. What are they doing for us? Well, here's a 3-page report showing your backups of the changes and baselining everything. I didn't realize I was an innovator at that time, but it was the precursor to all the reporting that went to the board. And regulators just absolutely loved it because it showed management what we were doing. And, to your point, that's where that change management is. If you know what's going on and you're engaged, then you better know how to do this. You can't manage a family or a household if you don't know what everybody's doing. Your kids leave the house, you don't know where they're going, what they're doing. How could you, help them?
Well, and I mean, what's kind of interesting is you mentioned security culture before. Escalation is one of the most important steps to establishing the security culture, and then what gets escalated. If we're dumping all kinds of reports we know our board isn't reading, it's like back in the days when people would give their board their 400-page business continuity program. And I'm like, do you want us to believe that the board read this and approves it? You know what I mean?
Well, the other thing is too, 10 years ago, I got 5 minutes once a year. So we had to give them everything.
Yeah.
So, I started attending, these IBA conferences and listening to you and some of the other folks talk about getting in front of the board. And I said, give me 2 minutes. I just want to get a report there. And all of a sudden now 2 minutes, now everybody's messaging me at the beginning of the month. Okay, what's going to the board? What's going to the board? Now I got people begging me to give them stuff to the board. So I flipped the script on them. It's fantastic.
Well, and that's a huge change. And I think we talked in the last podcast how, the parade of breach news that started with Target really kind of helped facilitate that change. But you know what, Jason, you're an expert in the field of information security. What trends, speaking of change, what trends or developments do you foresee, arising, and, how should small businesses be starting to prepare so they can adapt to these changes?
The two main ones, I don't really want to call it emerging because we're probably right in the middle of it, is the cloud computing. Probably about 10 years ago, we talked to the first bank that integrated Office 365, and we looked at each other at the table and said, this is never going to happen. No way. Why would we put email out in the cloud? You can't control it. But as we started seeing how it worked and all the cool things that benefits that it added, pretty much all of our clients now are going to Office 365. Getting into the cloud and getting away, honestly, I hope this is like a Simpsons episode where they say the Simpsons did it, they forecast everything. I see these smaller banks possibly going to infrastructure in the cloud with virtual desktop because, having these 3 or 4 servers inside, now you're having a virtual network, you're having standard desktops, and then you got to patch all these, you have all these individual configurations. If we could put that stuff in the cloud, have somebody else management, they don't have to worry about the infrastructure, they have set costs. I mean, from a budgeting standpoint, from a security standpoint, I think that's going to probably, I foresee is, kind of the wave of the future.
I have to say, Jason, I'm with you on that now, but I will say that I was at an event in 2018 where Eric, your boss, Eric, gave a presentation on the types of cloud services. And when he got to the infrastructure as a service, I'm sitting there thinking, there's no way that's ever going to happen in the banking environment. And now look where we are, you know what I'm saying? And so,
neither did we.
Eric was right.
It just evolves as they get better doing this stuff. And obviously, you don't want the TV repairman was, a noble and good job to have, but you have to evolve. And as we see how we could better secure these, it's being able to do stuff like that. And, there's the security aspect to that is now you're putting data on somebody else's systems. We need to make sure it's not in Bob's garage down the street somewhere. We want to make sure they have, what were the old SAS 70s, SSAE 16s, now SOC reports, to validate what they're doing. I think the other big one is, and then you've talked about it a lot on your show, for sure, is AI. I think in many different ways, I think artificial intelligence is here to stay. And I used to joke about the Skynet part of it, how they're going to take over and control everything, or it's going to be like in Wall-E where we're just going to be sitting in the chairs, mindless people drinking our sludge in cups. But, you look at the practical applications to it it's about data and data management. And we've talked about this earlier about where our risk is. Well, one of my biggest risks is making a mistake. We're human. We're looking at large sets of aggregate data, and there's great potential for us to miss something. You're looking at lines and lines of data, and everything looks fine. Everything looks there. How do you tell the difference? But if we can use AI, for example, to aggregate that data and maybe say, here's something that we see, it's never going to replace human eyes. There's always going to have to be somebody to interpret that and correlate that stuff. But if we could do that, that makes it so much easier, right? I mean, I could go out and what's the old, the Industrial Revolution? You could till the field with an ox, or you could get a tractor and do it in a tenth of the time, right? So let's work smarter, not harder.
I think it's about that, working smarter, not harder. I encourage everybody I meet, don't put your head in the sand, learn how to use AI. That's how you're going to defeat AI, is by learning to use it. And so I'm with you on that. And I definitely agree with you. I think cloud computing and AI are the two big, huge changes. I mean, and you could add several things to that, but when you do, it's like, well, actually that's cloud computing, or, well, actually that's AI. I mean, it's like, when you try to go down the list of, we're working on our, T7 article, the top 7 trends article. Well, it's all cloud computing and AI. So I think
they're 1 through 7.
Right. What advice would you give to small businesses that are, struggling with their information security process, and maybe they're considering engaging with a virtual information security officer for the first time?
I would say do your homework. Ask for references. I'm not going to say that we're the only ones out there and we do it perfect and we're the best. I know there's a lot of other groups out there, and we run into them in our trade shows as well. And people have asked me about them, and I've said wonderful things. I think there's a lot of good groups out there, and there's good people out there that do a lot of great things. So if you go with us, you go with them. Hey, I think we all have a vested interest in making sure our financial sector is well secured. I think everybody could agree on that. So, again, making sure, talk to references, find out, are they turnkey? Are they working with the same person? What's their pricing model like? We've talked about the a la carte service before. This is interesting. I've been engaged as a backup VISO. So they have an ISO, nail everything, phenomenal. I mean, their findings are like, if they get a finding, it's a shock. But one of the concerns was,
I think I know what you're talking about. You probably go commit suicide.
there's a senior member.
Yeah.
They lost a senior member of their team, expectedly, and that put a fear in the board. So they wanted to make sure, hey, if this guy, he's really good, what happens if he leaves? So they brought me in to do that. Well, they talked to one of the big firms, and then they came in and said, well, if you're going to bring us in, you're going to do it our way, and here's this 5-figure cost per year to do that. And he asked me, and I said, well, this is our hourly rate. If you use me for 2 hours, that's what it's going to be. And he kind of fell out of his chair, like, what am I missing? And it's like, well, I'm not really doing anything, so why am I going to bill you for it? So, again, it's stuff like that. It's vendor management 101. Talk to more than one vendor. Talk to references. Talk to people you trust. The banking world is such a small world, small community. Everybody knows everybody. Getting into the banking industry is very hard because it's about trust, and it is a network of people that hold it tight to the vest. So you talk to other folks in your industry and say, have you heard of these people? Do you know them? What do you think of them? And trust what they have to say. Because if they don't like them, there's a good chance you probably won't too either.
How much does proximity play in the virtual info? We watch networks, so we can watch it. We keep it within the United States mainly for legal reasons, right? But we can watch a network anywhere in America as long as we understand the risk in that network. But how about a virtual ISO? I mean, is there a proximity interest in that? Does that play a role?
Absolutely not. I think my farthest customer so far has been on the East Coast, and I think we went 5 years before I met him face to face.
Okay.
That's kind of the beauty of it. Is I would love for people listening to this on the West Coast or somewhere tropical to engage us. No, usually what I like to do is once a year or every other year, get out there and spend a couple days face to face. Nothing could break the beat having that face to face personal interaction. You get to know the people, you get to see what their life is like. You could put on airs for 45 minutes or an hour at a time, but spending the day with them really gets to do that. And I'm a foodie, so I enjoy checking out the local cuisine and that sort of stuff. But no, the one good thing about the pandemic was it showed us that we could work via Zoom and Teams very easily.
And I kind of agree with you. I feel like the day-to-day, you don't need to really be there, but the trust, we just talked about how important trust is, and you don't build trust through a screen.
No, it's sitting at a table with them, sharing a meal, talking about their family and stuff like that. That's where you get to see the human side of people, and that's what I love about it. Is it's not just everybody says, oh, banks are evil and they're only there to make money, and I think anybody in community banking could say that's probably not true. These are hardworking people that care about their job, and again, I come from a blue collar family, so maybe that's part of it. Is my dad would work shift work and overtime all the time, and seeing him go through that grind, just it's just that work ethic. So I think that's kind of part of the fun of it.
I totally agree, especially about bankers. I mean, not only are they really good people in general, and I mean, of course, there's the amazing people and there's the jerks everywhere, right? But in the banking industry, what you have is you have the small business mentality, but they're required by law to follow best practices, and it just makes for a really great industry to work with. But I'm also glad I'm glad to hear that the VISO concept is also resonating with small businesses and organizations that are outside of the banking industry, because let's face it, where our clients, our banking clients, face the most risk is in their customers, right? If their customers get hacked, then their customers can't make their loan payments, right? I mean, it's that simple. So I love how banks are trying now to reach out to their customers and help their customers with their security processes. Jason, we're out of time. I really appreciate the insights and ideas that you've shared with us today and in the previous podcast that we did. And I'm sure that those who listen to CyberViews will also, majorly enjoy the contributions you've made. I'm Dan Hadaway.
And I'm Jason Mikolanis.
And this has been a CyberViews podcast presented by Infotex. And never forget it, awareness is 9/11 to the battle.